Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital Today channel. Anna Devane and Sam McCall returned to Port Charles under a heavy cloud of dread, their expressions taut with the kind of tension that telegraphed something deeply wrong, and though they tried to slip back into town quietly, word traveled fast in Port Charles, faster than secrets, faster than rumors, faster even than danger, and those who knew Anna and Sam well could sense that whatever brought them home wasn't ordinary. What no one yet knew was that the two women carried a terrible secret, one that tied together several fractured threads running through the city: the shooting of Drew Cain, the suspicious behavior of Curtis Ashford, the unraveling of Michael Corinthos' alibi, and even Sonny Corinthos' latest wave of unseen enemies. While Anna and Sam strategized about the safest way to share their discovery, proof that a dangerous figure thought long gone had resurfaced in a way that threatened several families, the rest of Port Charles simmered with parallel tensions. Liesl Albrecht, ever a force of unpredictable loyalties and razor-sharp instincts, had already made a stealthy, covert move on her own, arriving at Drew's house ostensibly to express reluctant support for Willow's sudden Thanksgiving wedding but secretly intending to reposition herself at the center of Nina and Willow's fragile reconciliation. Nina, emotional and desperate to regain her daughter's trust, had followed Liesl's lead without knowing that Liesl had her own agenda. Meanwhile, Jason Morgan, returning to a familiar role as protector, moved strategically around the city to safeguard Sonny from a threat Sonny wasn't even fully aware of yet, one that Jason and Anna were beginning to realize was connected to Sam's most recent investigation. And while Jason coordinated quietly in the shadows, Ava Jerome, who claimed she was trying to clear Willow's name, ended up betraying Nina in a moment of uncalculated impulse, revealing to Portia Robinson that Nina had tried to redirect suspicion onto someone else entirely. At the Jerome Gallery, Trina Robinson had come seeking advice from Ava, hoping she could persuade Curtis to distance himself from Jordan since she believed her father might listen to her if she was firm enough. Ava, who had once mastered the art of manipulation, surprised Trina by discouraging ultimatums and urging patience instead, but before she could guide her properly, Portia arrived with an invitation for Thanksgiving dinner, one Trina would have accepted eagerly if she hadn't already promised to meet Curtis and Stella. When Trina enthusiastically asked Portia to come along, Portia declined with the excuse of hospital duties, but her daughter wasn't fooled. She sensed the family fracturing at its corners and feared she was losing her mother or father, or perhaps both. After soothing Trina as best she could, Portia pulled Ava aside, only for Ava's flashes of guilt over betraying Nina's confidentiality to rise to the surface. Ava confessed, piece by piece, that Nina had tried to shift suspicion away from Willow by implicating someone else in the shooting of Drew Cain, someone Nina hadn't named aloud but whom Ava now believed was Portia herself. Portia panicked instantly, horror blooming across her face as she imagined being arrested, interrogated, and potentially giving birth behind bars if she couldn't prove her innocence. Ava tried to calm her, theorizing that Michael would still be the primary suspect if his alibi crumbled and that Nina might not have said anything concrete to the police yet, but Portia knew that even being forced to account for her whereabouts could open up a new set of problems she wasn't prepared to face. Across town at the Quartermaine mansion, Brooke Lynn battled her own anxiety when Chase insisted on cooking a traditional turkey dinner for the notoriously cursed Quartermaine Thanksgiving, only for Michael to walk in mid-discussion and ignite immediate tension with Chase over Willow. When Michael abruptly revealed that Willow had agreed to remarry Drew, Chase and Brooke Lynn reeled, especially as Michael implied the marriage was a legal strategy rather than a matter of the heart. Brooke Lynn, torn between loyalty and reason, admitted that Michael's theory made sense, but Chase was disappointed to hear that coming from her, especially after he believed she had been ready to consider Michael's guilt earlier. Brooke Lynn quickly explained that her perspective shifted after Michael helped her take a huge step forward with Giovanni Gio Palmieri, who now called her mom, a milestone that softened Chase enough to ease the tension. Meanwhile, once Rocco Falconeri was released on bail, he returned home to reunite with Danny Morgan and Charlotte Cassadine, unaware that the complexity surrounding their families had placed metaphorical targets on all three of them. Outside, Lulu Spencer confided to Jason her fear that Sonny might have had Professor Henry Hank Dalton eliminated. Jason, steady and unwavering, assured her Sonny wasn't involved in Dalton's disappearance, but Lulu worried Dalton might return to haunt them all. Jason then shifted the conversation, emphasizing how dangerous it was for the three teens, Danny, Charlotte, and Rocco, to be pulled into the crosshairs of so many intersecting conflicts. Lulu reluctantly agreed, shaken by the realization that multiple criminal threads connected directly to the people her son interacted with daily. At the Port Charles Grill, Drew cornered Martin Gray and insisted he officiate the small Thanksgiving wedding he had planned with Willow. Martin was surprised Willow had agreed, but Drew smugly insisted he always got what he wanted. Stella Henry, having dinner with Curtis, overheard Drew and grew visibly irritated until she finally stormed over to confront him. Drew, cool and cutting, implied that loose ends for mold investigations could easily be reopened if Stella pushed him too far. Martin warned Drew that he couldn't legally represent him if things escalated, but Drew brushed it off. Curtis, watching all of this closely, sensed that Drew's threat was intentional. Drew still believed Curtis pulled the trigger the night of the shooting and insisted Michael was covering for him, even as Drew schemed to find another way to make Curtis pay without taking the fall himself. While Curtis attempted to redirect Stella's stress back toward Thanksgiving plans with Trina, the edges of Drew's smug smirk suggested he was already several steps deep into a darker plan. Back at Drew's house, Liesl Albrecht, in full manipulation mode, pretended to accept Willow's decision to marry Drew even though she admitted she didn't like it. She subtly steered Willow toward softening her stance with Nina, then theatrically opened the door to reveal Nina tearfully waiting outside in her car. Nina poured her heart out, admitting she missed Willow and promising to support her without conditions. Though Willow couldn't guarantee she would ever trust Nina fully again, she confessed she missed their bond too and agreed to let Nina attend the wedding and try rebuilding their relationship. Liesl hugged them both, a rare moment of family unity, even though Liesl's motives were never as pure as she made them seem. And at the PCPD, Dante Falconeri and Nathan West pored over the details of Drew's shooting, determined to anticipate Alexis Davis's next legal maneuver. As they examined the suspect list once more, Dante's instincts suddenly sharpened. Curtis Ashford's alibi had holes that didn't align with the timeline, and the moment he realized that, he knew they needed to dig deeper and fast. What Dante didn't know, however, was that Anna and Sam's terrible secret tied directly back to that investigation. They had uncovered evidence that Dalton was not only alive but actively working with a shadowy figure connected to several attacks in Port Charles, evidence that revealed Dalton had been watching Curtis, Drew, Sonny, and even Nina long before the shooting. Anna and Sam were terrified because the information they possessed suggested Dalton was planning something explosive and imminent, something that could shatter multiple families, destroy several reputations, and leave Port Charles reeling if they didn't act quickly. And while Jason instinctively shielded Sonny, Liesl executed covert maneuvers, and Ava scrambled to undo the consequences of her betrayal, the real threat circled closer, hidden in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As the night deepened over Port Charles and the Thanksgiving holiday crept closer, Anna Devane and Sam McCall withdrew into a dimly lit corner office at the PCPD, desperate to organize the pieces of the dreadful revelation they carried, their voices low but fierce as they debated how to reveal the truth without igniting chaos, for the secret they unearthed was more than a warning. It was a catastrophic thread that tied nearly every major player in Port Charles to a sinister figure who should never have resurfaced. They had confirmation that Professor Henry Hank Dalton, believed by many to be either dead or vanished beyond reach, had not only survived but had spent months infiltrating networks connected to Drew Kane's shooting, Sonny Corinthos' empire, Curtis Ashford's investigation, and even Brooke Lynn's new family circle. What rattled them further was discovering that Dalton had been shadowing Jason Morgan, which was why Sam had suddenly disappeared on a lead she told no one about, not even Jason. During her pursuit, she stumbled onto a devastating truth. Dalton had infiltrated a private intelligence contractor that once collaborated with the WSB, and he possessed classified documents linking back to Anna, Valentine, and several defunct WSB operations. This meant Dalton had the ammunition to expose old secrets that could ruin careers and lives, and destroy the fragile trust Port Charles had been clinging to. Sam and Anna had found surveillance photos of several Port Charles residents, including Willow, Michael, Gio, Trina, and even Nina, each marked with coded symbols Sam recognized as Dalton's way of ranking potential leverage versus potential targets. Dalton wasn't simply returning, he was preparing for something large, something methodical, something that required him to watch his prey before striking. Anna knew they had to act quickly, but she also feared that going public would push Dalton into moving sooner than expected. Meanwhile, the ripple effects of Ava Jerome's betrayal of Nina Reeves worsened by the hour. Portia Robinson, shaken to the core, replayed Ava's confession over and over as she drove home, the thought of Nina pointing the finger at her tightening around her like a noose. By the time Portia arrived at her house, she was trembling, terrified that every knock on the door might be the police. She remembered her whereabouts the night of the shooting and knew she had taken a secret detour, one she couldn't easily explain without exposing Jordan or making Curtis look complicit. As Portia paced across her living room, she realized Ava hadn't betrayed Nina out of malice but rather out of impulsive panic, though that didn't soften the looming threat. Portia contemplated confiding in Curtis but feared he might conceal something from her in return, especially now that she suspected the police would turn their eyes toward him again. Across town, Sonny Corinthos sat in his dimly lit office at Pozzolo's, quietly sensing that something was wrong long before Jason Morgan entered the room. Jason closed the door behind him, his expression tight, his tone urgent as he explained that Anna and Sam were onto something big and that Dalton's disappearance wasn't what anyone thought. Sonny exhaled deeply, rubbing the side of his face as he processed the information. The last thing he needed was another unpredictable enemy resurfacing without warning. Sonny asked Jason how certain he was, and Jason replied with absolute clarity, Sam wouldn't come to him unless the danger was real. Sonny nodded, knowing Dalton had once been connected to arms deals and violent collectives that operated outside traditional criminal ecosystems, groups that didn't follow the unspoken rules Sonny valued. Jason insisted that Sonny increase protection for Avery and Donna immediately, and though Sonny hated appearing afraid in front of his family, he didn't hesitate. He called Dex, instructing him to establish new security routes and increase surveillance at the Corinthos compound. As Jason handled the logistics, Sonny leaned back in his chair, mind spinning. He wondered if Nina knew anything and if she had sensed danger before she and Sonny drifted apart. He didn't want to think about her betrayal or her marriage to Drew, but he couldn't deny that Nina's instincts often pushed her toward the truth even when she stumbled into it accidentally. At the Quartermain mansion, Brooke Lynn finished preparing for her dinner with Chase when she noticed Gio lingering by the piano, his fingers brushing the keys but not pressing them. She sensed something was wrong and approached him gently. Gio confessed he overheard Michael arguing with someone earlier, mentioning something about Curtis being tied to Drew's shooting. Brooke Lynn, alarmed, assured Gio to stay out of grown-up conflicts, but she couldn't help feeling a surge of dread. Joe's safety had become her heart's priority, and with Dalton lurking, she feared the boy might easily become collateral damage. She quickly texted Chase, urging him to come home early. At that moment, Curtis, sitting at the Port Charles Grill with Stella and finishing their dessert, suddenly felt his phone vibrate. It was Jordan, asking to meet urgently. Curtis excused himself, much to Stella's frustration. She feared trouble and warned him to stay away from anything that might draw the cops' attention. Curtis promised he'd be careful but heeded Jordan's message anyway. When he arrived at her office, she closed the blinds and locked the door. Jordan confessed she had sensed something was off that night, something she hadn't wanted to admit. She explained that she had found traces of Dalton's DNA on a set of shell casings recovered from another crime scene weeks before Drew's shooting, but the information had disappeared from the database before she could act on it. Curtis' jaw tightened. He realized someone inside the PCPD, or someone with access to its systems, was manipulating evidence. Jordan, struggling to keep her voice steady, asked Curtis if he was absolutely sure about his alibi that night because if someone was framing him, they were doing a good job. Curtis, shaken, admitted he couldn't recall every minute clearly because he had taken a detour, one he hadn't told anyone about. Jordan's eyes widened as she pressed him for details. Curtis hesitated but finally admitted he went searching for Dalton after receiving an anonymous tip that Dalton was spotted near the docks. Jordan's jaw dropped. Curtis had been right near the shooting location and had no alibi for the minutes that mattered. Meanwhile, Dante and Nathan, working late at the PCPD, were oblivious to Jordan's secret meeting but heavily focused on Curtis, Michael, and Drew. Dante wondered aloud whether someone was manipulating all three of them. Nathan agreed and suggested they widen the suspect list again. Dante paused, rubbing his chin, suddenly thinking about an old WSB file Anna once referenced. Nathan suggested they talk to Anna, unaware she was already back in town. Across the city at Drew's house, Willow tried to calm her nerves while Nina and Liesl fussed with wedding plans. Willow felt grateful for Nina's emotions but sensed Liesl was forcing the reconciliation faster than it was ready to grow. As they talked, Liesl stepped out to answer a call, one that made her face go pale. It was a coded message from an unknown number containing a single phrase, "The past is not past." Liesl recognized the cryptic wording from her old WSB dealings. Nina asked if she was okay, but Liesl brushed it off. Yet she couldn't ignore the truth, Dalton wasn't just back. He was taunting them. Meanwhile, Ava Jerome arrived home after a long and emotionally draining day, only to find a white envelope slipped under her door. Her stomach clenched. She picked it up carefully, recognizing immediately that the handwriting wasn't from any friend or acquaintance. Inside was a single photograph, Ava standing outside the gallery earlier that day with a timestamp printed on the bottom corner. Behind her in the distant reflection of the glass door was a blurred figure. But Ava recognized the silhouette instantly. It was Dalton. She nearly dropped the photo in shock. Fear crawled up her spine as she realized someone had been watching her all day. Worse, he had been close enough to follow her home. Panic rising, Ava locked her door, closed her blinds, and dialed Sunny's number with trembling fingers. Sunny answered immediately, already on edge, and Ava told him everything in a breathless rush. Sunny told her not to move, not to breathe, not to let her guard down. He was sending Jason to her house immediately. Jason arrived within minutes, quietly sweeping the perimeter and the interior of the apartment before confirming Ava was safe, for now. Ava handed him the photograph, and Jason examined it closely, the set of his jaw tightening as he recognized Dalton's silhouette. Jason's eyes narrowed as he said he needed to take it to Anna and Sam. Ava hugged herself tightly, whispering, "Jason, what's happening?" And Jason, with uncharacteristic honesty, said, "Something big. Something bad. And it's already started." As Jason left for the PCPD, Port Charles felt the invisible shift, the sense that something massive was moving beneath the surface, tying together every secret, every betrayal, every unfinished feud. And as Jason walked through the dark streets, his phone buzzed with a message from Sam, "We need to meet. Anna has something you won't believe." Jason stopped, stared at the message, then picked up his pace. Because he knew, better than anyone in Port Charles, that when Anna Devane said a secret was terrible, it meant the storm was already here. As Jason hurried toward the PCPD with the photograph of Dalton clutched in his gloved hand, Anna and Sam were already poring over a newly decrypted file that made everything even worse. Dalton hadn't been acting alone. Sam's tech contact had just sent her confirmation that Dalton was connected to a covert network known as Helix, a rogue offshoot of a former WSB splinter cell, one that specialized in psychological warfare, strategic abductions, and political manipulation. The file showed redacted profiles of 3 additional operatives currently embedded in different cities, and one of them had recently traveled to Port Charles under an alias. Anna's blood ran cold when she recognized the blurred face in the grainy surveillance still. The operative had once been under her command decades ago, someone she believed dead after a failed extraction mission. Sam pressed a hand against her forehead, overwhelmed by the realization that Port Charles wasn't simply facing Dalton, it was facing an organized group with a vendetta rooted in WSB history. Before Anna could process the implications, Jason arrived, silently placing the photograph on the table. One glance at Dalton's reflected silhouette made Anna close her eyes in dread. "He's already watching us," she whispered. Jason explained how Ava had received the photo and how Dalton had been close enough to stalk her without detection. Sam tapped the corner of the image. "This isn't random. Dalton wants us to know he's moving. He wants us off balance." Jason clenched his jaw, insisting they warn Sunny immediately, but Anna countered that Sunny was already protected by Jason's security measures. What needed attention now were the civilians: Trina, Gio, Willow, Avery, Donna, and anyone else Dalton had marked. Sam suggested forming a coordinated protection plan with Dante, but Anna shook her head. Too many people inside the PCPD could unknowingly feed intel to Helix. They needed secrecy and precision. Meanwhile, across town, Portia sat curled on her couch, replaying Curtis' earlier words and debating whether to call him. Panic simmered in her chest as she imagined police knocking at her door, asking impossible questions she couldn't safely answer. At the same time, Curtis, reeling from his conversation with Jordan, walked alone near the docks, staring out over the water as he questioned everything he thought he knew about the night of the shooting. He remembered the anonymous tip more clearly now, the voice disguised, the tone urgent, telling him Dalton was nearby. Curtis